Gabriel Sickle, also known as Khord Kitty, is a furry best known for wearing his white fursuit around convention centers for people to look at. He's also known for a whole bunch of other stuff that y'all probably got an idea about already, because as we've learned recently, the furry fandom has their fair share of some pretty weird people, and that's putting it lightly. Shout out to the Patreon members as always, and if you'd like to support the channel yourself, you can do so by checking out the link below or in the corner. With all that being said, let's jump right into everything and see what's going on with this guy, because let's just say it's quite a lot of stuff. Khord's beginnings are nothing exactly crazy or weird. His father is a pathologist and he has an older sister and two younger brothers. He had issues in his early childhood due to not understanding social cues very well and was shopped around schools throughout his elementary life in the Rochester area due to special education not being very well established yet. He admitted to feeling left behind because he's one of the middle children, so he would always try to one-up his sister and other brothers to get the admiration he so desperately craved. He explains in detail the stuff he did, like learning to play piano after one of his brothers did, and making a 3-part Kroll piano piece and 70-minute short film to one-up his sister, even stating that life is a game to him. Alongside the bullying he faced in high school for being socially awkward, he relied on his family for most social interactions throughout his life. Khord would end up finding about furries in their NSFW artwork, and even drew similar pictures of Calvin and Hobbes together alongside Bambi, which for lack of a better term, is pretty weird and very suspicious given the ages of the characters involved. His parents found them and made him toss the drawings, and this was the last time he ever drew that kind of stuff. He would go to college and end up meeting a furry named Emerald Sage in 2008, which led to him going to his very first FurryCon, Further Confusion 2009. He ended up getting his degree and meeting more furries that lived in the house together, and after seeing this he tried on his own, but failed and bailed on his roommates 3 months into the attempt. This made him start hating bronies because one of his roommates was one, though there are multiple posts of him participating in that subculture, such as posting about a backstory for a character called Coney, uploading a YouTube video called MLP Vor, and even talking about pony suits on Twitter in a positive light. Nonetheless, after this he moved back to New York and got a couple small roles as an extra in TV shows and even a short film at one point. The drama was too much for him to handle, however, and so he dipped out once again just 3 months into that. In 2012 got a professional acting job as an extra in an unsold pilot, and in 2013 was living in Manhattan. He also lists a couple more notable experiences up to that point for any other people interested in his life. Khord's life wasn't all peaches and cream, however, as a post made in 2010 showed him giving his thoughts on the current family dynamic, with the most negative parts pertaining to his dad who seemed to only criticize and chastise him instead of being a positive role model for his son, and his sister which seemed to be at a small crossroads, quite possibly due to his weird nature or something else. He would say positive things about his mother and one of his brothers, though he was planning to leave the family behind altogether, which saddened him, and his youngest brother seemed to be heading down a path of irrelevance due to his autism and giving up on trying anything in life. He also mentions that furries are his family now, meaning that even though he loves the majority of his family, he too seems to be moving on from them. Khord would talk more about his dad a few months later and that he misrepresented him as a liar, but was only honest with him behind his back for some reason, and later on at the end of the year would talk about his insecurities while high or drunk, like how he avoids eye contact with people after another furry told him he stared at him too much. He also ended up dating Emerald Sage after meeting her, but just 2 months later they would break up for unknown reasons. He would talk about his insecurities hanging around the furry fandom because he's afraid people outside will think he's some sort of sexual deviant and loser in a post. And at a furry meet at some place called Crack Chicken, people were already starting to dislike him much to his dismay as he ranted about it. Khord was already getting a negative reception in his furry circle, with people trying to avoid him as much as they could for one reason or another. He even met Starblade, who's known for making a meme called "Fuck You, I'm a Dragon," after seeing both their names mentioned in the blog on people avoiding the furry fandom, talked with him for a bit, and then just 2 weeks later he was stabbed to death by someone. Khord would go on to make a whole song dedicated to him about 2 months after the news broke.
No questions were answered or judgments made. Where's Aurora when the dragon slayed? I wanted to ask how did the sky taste? I want us goes the other way.
He would hit up another FurryCon and have a good time with some friends, getting art from someone named Kalu aka Nick, someone known for drawing explicit furry cub images and straight up CP in the mid-2000s. Khord has known Nick since at least 2009 based off this comment he made on another furry cub drawing that he drew, showing the kind of people he likes to hang around with. He would piss off some more people at edgy jokes a couple times throughout the years and talk about it on his Furfinity page, and his infamy was starting to grow more and more as people start to attribute his name with overall negativity, such as using it for a villain in the video game DC Universe Online over a decade ago. He would complain about getting free artwork that wasn't accurate to his cat character, which actually has a backstory of some dude becoming a cat after running one over, so cool I guess. He would complain about more people ghosting and blocking him for being an annoying person, and then get into a spat with someone named Ringtailed Fox after he talked down to him before they began a roleplay session, in which Fox would try to vandalize his wiki for a page in a petty revenge plot. During all this, Khord would post on a furry internet forum looking for furry roommates with people telling him that was a very bad idea to roommate with people you don't know, let alone random people, and let alone random people in the furry fandom on the internet. He would start to complain about his roommates being annoying to him, but that's better than living with his parents. But just a few months later was starting up a much larger scale rental scheme, trying to get a total of 7 people in one place together. People would say this is a terrible idea to do for obvious reasons. He would reply as such, basically downplaying their concerns, and would go on to reveal that this was all part of his scheme to get involved at Broadway by living in Manhattan. He would make similar posts on his fur affinity, and even replied to a minor at one point who seemed to have issues staying sober, and would even post a video showing off exactly what the place looked like. Khord would continue to chat in the forum he posted to add in with those who are still in there shocked that this is even happening. Talk about how some people go down on each other cause why not. But then 4 of the 6 people who agreed to join up with him flaked out the very last minute to his surprise. He would fill those slots by finding people on Craigslist, ask if someone wants to live in his room with him to make his rent even cheaper, and then go on about a story with people not paying their rent and saying he never even got them to sign a contract with him when they moved into the place. He would go on to update people about the place on a forum a few months later, with people noticing he was back at it once more, with him explaining he looks for furry roommates only to fit in and feel comfortable with his life, equating it to liberals living with each other based off similar ideals. Khord would post that he found another roommate to help fill the ever-changing gap in his home life. Just a month later would post yet another opening for someone to join him, showing that the people who live with him are slacking off pretty hard. He would make yet another post on the forum going over multiple grievances with his roommates, with the first 2 summing things up pretty well for him in a situation he set himself up for by asking for furry roommates in the first place. He would go on to complain more about his renter troubles around a year and a half later, and seemed to finally get the message that people have been telling him, and periodically throughout the years would post about needing new renters to live with them at a cheap price. Most likely with 5 other people, what can only be described as a very uncomfortable living situation for everyone involved. Khord so far is already beyond most internet furries. Not only is he socially awkward and really weird overall, he has a couple notable differences from most. The main difference with him is that he has crossed paths with some very unsavory people throughout his time on the internet, but at this point one can chalk it up to being a bit of a naive and go-lucky type of person. Of course this was just the beginning of his internet life, and those cracks of him being an annoying person would soon start to bleed more into the furry fandom as he would continue to make his way around. Khord was allegedly seen in a BuzzFeed article in 2012 that claims 2 furries went down on each other in public as seen by his post on Fur Affinity, but the image isn't available anymore, so whether you believe him or not is up for you to decide on. He was even present during the infamous chlorine gas leak at Midwest Fur Fest 2014 and went on to make a crazy conspiracy that it was someone who was making drugs that caused it to go down, when in actuality nobody knows who did it even to this very day.
Well, what I think happened were there were some furries who were making drugs on the stairwell. They figured that, hey, if we make drugs, we'll get high, we'll go to the dance, yada, 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 whatever.
He's also gone on to preach against the degeneracy that was waiting for his 2015 and disavowed those people as it gave furries a bad name. Noble stance to have at a first glance, yet he was also buddy-buddy with someone named Growly, a furry who sent minor images of himself in 2001, served about 2 to 3 years in prison because of it, got banned off Fur Affinity in 2009 after getting caught talking to another minor, and then 18 years later in 2019 got arrested once more for similar charges and served 158 days in prison again. In fact, Khord was so close to him he even featured Growly in the skit at Rainforest to nobody's surprise.
Bring forth the first defendant, Glacier Wolf.
He's also known for spending a lot of money going to furry cons, saving his expenses by eating only peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and having 6 roommates in his apartment to keep rent cheap.
So, I was living in a 4-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. It cost about $2,300 per month, and I split that between 6 other roommates.
Alongside that, he was even featured in this video promoting furries in a positive light after Syrian refugees managed to make their way to a hotel where convention was going on at. It's needless to say that Khord is well deep within the furry fandom, but of course, controversy would arise because that's usually how these videos go down. Khord would order his fursuit in September 2012, but a year later realized he was scammed by the person and only got repaid 7 years later in 2019. He would then go on to commission his fursuit head known as the Smile Head from Soap Dish in 2014, and would debut his entire fursuit at Anthrocon 2014 for the world to see. At the MMF FurCon, he would go on stage and perform a song about smelly fursuits, in which someone would make a comment directed at him with a similar statement.
I think I know what that smell is.
Now given Khord's fursuit was all white, there was bound to be some trouble keeping it clean as he had to do some extra work as it was easy to dirty, but unfortunately for everyone, Khord had no idea how to do this. Within a year, he was already ordering a brand new head to wear at conventions, and just a few months later, people get a look at what the finished product would be like, alongside begging for donation money to fully pay for it. Khord would go around asking people on Twitter on how to keep his suit clean and smell decent to middling results, as it was becoming pretty clear the head itself was starting to get tattered up all while waiting for a new one to get finished. People on the Tumblr account Dirty Grimy Fursuits would start to talk about how dirty his suit is and claim that the crotch area was starting to turn a yellow color, in which he would respond saying he used to have no idea how to keep it clean but has since learned, also stating he has to do more work due to the entire suit being white. Despite just this one-off claim, he would go on to make another post clarifying things more, such as stating his drying method of hanging his fursuit wasn't getting rid of the sweat, which led to a lot of the nasty smells, stating his new method of cleaning before saying a thank you statement to those people not being rude about it to him. This obviously made Khord insecure, seeing that people thought he smelt bad, so much that he would still ask random people on Twitter about it, and would mess up his head even more by submerging it completely underwater and partially tearing one of the ears off. He would end up losing his bodysuit at the RMFC convention and had to borrow one from someone at another convention a few weeks later, also showing people that he was brushing his fursuit, so he must be doing a good job now, right? Well, he wasn't, cause someone would put a sticky note on his hotel door saying that he smells bad, and again go to Twitter complaining about people saying that he smells bad. He would put down his method of washing and ask if he was doing anything wrong, and would slightly admit to taking only one shower a day despite being in a heavy fursuit all day long running around a convention center. He would have to get the zipper fixed by Cosmic the Lynx, showing just how deteriorated his fursuit was getting, and would even make a post on his Fur Affinity talking about the smell issue and how he's hopefully fixed things by this point with advice and help from his wife Bun Bun as well. Despite all this, going into 2016, his fursuit still smelled like shit though, as there were multiple posts of Dirty Grimy Fursuits talking about how it smelled that bad to everyone around him, with some people saying that he does try to keep it clean, it's just really hard for him, while others say that he smelled bad like this for 2 years up to that point, implying that he ain't doing a good enough job and needs to try way more. Khord himself would mention that people starting to say he smells again, and Cosmic would show up and offer to get him a new suit made for him as he had open commissions, before stating that he tried to make a post on the Tumblr page in question before it got denied by him. They would state that he should just get a new one at this point because it's too late to salvage it up and clean it up like he's been trying to, and they do offer to help him find a cleaning site to help fix his issue. Khord would make a post saying that they let him through basically blowing everything off the person said, notably stating that he can't just bow out of a musical skit despite this glaring issue, and pretty much just letting the words of others go in one ear and right out the other as the page owners reply in expected fashion, calling him out for giving everyone nothing but excuses for why his suit smells bad and that he just needs to suck it up and fix the issue. Khord would go on to make another Fur Affinity post talking about his new method of cleaning his fursuit after getting advice from people, which is partially him taking the blame off himself and putting it on others, and the other part making small changes and using more disinfectant when cleaning it down. He would start to get rug burn from the fursuit head he submerged underwater and damaged, with Cosmic giving some advice to him on how to mitigate the issues in the meantime. He would end up straight losing the entire bodysuit part of the fursuit in a Greyhound trip, and a few months later would get a replacement head and a new bodysuit by Cosmic in time for another furry con he had attended. Despite it being over a year since the situation on the Dirty Grimy Fursuits Tumblr page, he would continue to complain about it on the site, showing that he was still butthurt people were mean to him when calling him out for smelling bad, while also asking if some people want to help him out for a future furry dance competition mix at an upcoming convention. Khord would end up showing off his original fursuit head in an abysmal state of decay at this point in time, and just a few weeks later will lose it as it fell off his car, with a post on Fur Affinity stating he even lost a new bodysuit alongside the old head as well. Khord has gone on to claim that the original bodysuit wasn't lost in 2016 but actually stolen, but given how bad it smelled plus the lack of knowledge on the situation, it's safe to say it was just straight up lost one way or another. A third fursuit head would be found in 2018 as someone named Khord Kitty would mention they were the owner of a Khord Kitty head, with more pictures of it on the maker's Fur Affinity page showing it off at multiple angles. Khord himself actually owned this head at one point in time in 2014, but for some unknown reason never used it much as far as people can tell, though it can be seen in a video posted in October 2016 worn by Khord. Khord got a hold of it sometime in early 2016, and people find out she turned 22 in 2020, and this became concerning as they would find out they met around the same time when she was 18 and he was 30, which gave off some very strange vibes. He would continue to talk about his insecurity of smelling bad, trying to equate the Cure the Wolf situation to himself when that went down in 2018, showing that if you want to live rent-free in this guy's head for years, just tell him he smells bad. It also comes as no one's surprise that his living conditions were paltry as well, as the RV he lived in at one point looked like this with a giant mess everywhere, and when people saw those images it became a lot more clear why he couldn't keep his fursuit clean throughout its lifetime. Khord again to beef with someone known as Ryan Hill, a furry known for taking the credit for the gas leak mentioned earlier, among other things like making a bomb threat at Anthrocon for example. The point is, the dude is extremely unhinged and borderline insane, and Khord is well aware of Ryan, tweeting about him and the things he's done within the furry fandom. Instead of just keeping him at arm's length and watching the fire burn, Khord would ignite the inferno by making a song about him and sending it straight to the man himself. He would even get Ryan on a podcast episode just 4 days later, in which Ryan's mother comes onto the mic to defend her son from the allegations made against him.
I keep hearing last what they say. What? Can you
what?
Mom, clarify that the FBI said I didn't do anything at the convention at the chlorine one?
Yeah, the FBI came to his house, searched his house and everything, and there was no evidence of anything. It was just a bogus threat that Ryan made.
Khord claimed that Ryan's been sending him scat images among more unhinged stuff. And while the podcast episode itself is extremely boring despite this epic crossover event, the mother would end things off with a couple base statements of her own.
But yeah, no, I mean, in my opinion, to be a furry, you got to have some type of mental disorder or something where, you know, things aren't right, whether you don't have friends or, you know, it excites you or the sexual part or whatever. Oh, and the other thing I just wanted to say is when I was informed by the FBI that Ryan had made those threats, I asked that he be arrested, and they said they could not arrest him because he didn't do anything wrong. I said, excuse me, there's many other people that have made threats like that or similar to that on the internet that were arrested, and they said we can't arrest him. And I wanted him arrested.
Within the very day the podcast came out, he'll try to commission age regression artwork of Khord to troll him or something with the artist saying no, but he would eventually find someone to get the drawing made, so cool I guess. He even made a Facebook group to troll Khord some more, which included his full docs because that's kind of what happens when you deal with degenerates on the internet like this. Khord would retaliate by threatening to dox Ryan on 4chan and say he's an ISIS supporter and threaten to spread his docs around further, stooping down to the same level as someone he antagonized first because what else do you expect from these people? Hill would retaliate some more by doxing Khord's mother because why not, and then would try to start a change.org petition calling Khord a pedo and sex offender. Hill will go on to impersonate RC Fox, a furry who was a pedo and got caught with CP and ended up anti-heroing before his sentencing, basically solidifying that dude as someone who just wants a lot of attention and will do anything he can to get it. Khord's wife Bun Bun, also known as Deb, also has their own story going on, as they first met when she was looking for a pianist at a furry con. They would officially get together in early 2015, with Khord already making jokes about getting her pregnant just 2 months later, and throughout the months he would make periodic posts on social media about his love for her and whatnot like any normal couple would. They would buy an RV together as they planned to move to California, and on March 26, 2016, Khord would propose to an already pregnant Deb just a little over a year into the relationship. During this drive, they'd even be mentioned in a news article about a bird making a nest on top of their RV, almost like a good omen of sorts for them in their future lives. They even have a couple pictures out there of them in their fursuits together, so all was well between the two, right? Well, there were already some cracks forming during this time, as Deb would make a post talking about how some people were mad that she was pregnant and that's why she never speaks with them, and then straight up says that they're getting married not because she's pregnant but because they love each other so much due to these people talking bad about her. Nonetheless, Deb would post on Facebook the day of their wedding, and on November 5th, 2016, Khord and Deb would officially become husband and wife.
This is my honor to now pronounce you Kitty and Bunny. You may meet your muzzles.
Those cracks would start to grow bigger as when taking a look through Khord's LinkedIn, he couldn't hold a job to save his life as he went through multiple in just the course of a year, and Deb would start to softly complain on Twitter about being the sole breadwinner of the family. At one point, she would even slap him in the heat of an argument, and in 2019, Khord would announce that they're going into an open relationship due to health issues. However, just a few days later on Facebook, he would post a fire dog meme obviously implying things weren't looking good in his life for the moment. 3 days after that, he would have a breakdown on Twitter stating about how his life is falling apart. And on July 5th, 2019, Khord and Deb would officially file for divorce, ending their marriage at just a little over 2.5 years in. Khord would say that Deb told him he cared about his music career more than his own kid, soaked some more on Twitter for a bit, but then just 2 weeks later claimed to not care anymore and that it was actually a good thing this was happening because it opened his eyes to how toxic their relationship was. He would then start to claim that Deb is abusive later on in the year, go on to say that she deleted a bunch of media revolving around their child, and make a 1-year divorce anniversary post about how he surrounded himself with so much better people now. There's also some miscellaneous court stuff that really isn't that important right now, but it shows that Deb was gung-ho and trying to end this relationship as quickly as she could. Khord in general also has years worth of posts where he comes off as a very attention-seeking person, not malicious or anything but just annoying at best and obnoxious at worst, constantly sticking himself into situations where he doesn't need to all the time, even questioning if he's ever started drama before due to this general dislike for him. He was even roommates with a furry named Simba Lion who shot 2 police officers and was shot back at, dying in the hospital a few days later from his wounds, and was also friends with Kentari at one point, a zoophile vet tech who got caught in the 2018 Zoo Sadist leaks. Also, that whole situation with losing his bodysuit in 2016, that was after he got kicked out of an RV with someone named Wade for an unknown reason, possibly due to being annoying or something else entirely, but we may never know for certain. Khord would catch the attention of Kiwi Farms, and so a thread would be made on him, in which the man of the hour would comment throughout after finding out about its existence, much to the user's delight. They would find out a lot about him, including his past of being a so-called actor, which equated to being an extra in a multitude of projects, such as The Wolf of Wall Street as seen by the very right of this image, Bridge of Spies as seen in the background of this shot where he posted on Twitter, and an episode of the TV show Blue Bloods where they dressed him up in a baby costume during a Halloween episode. He would even claim that since he's been on a handful of legal TV shows, he has an actual understanding of how the law works, which is really funny to hear coming out of anyone, let alone him. Khord also has an extensive musical career as well, such as writing a song about farting, for example.
When I break my gas, it's hardly a puff of small gas, no hardly. It's a great typhoon.
He even released an album called Major Abortion Promotion in 2010, featuring 60 songs in total, with bangers such as Eat My Cake Bitch, Abu Musab Al-Zakari Is Dead, and Diarrhea.
When I went out to get the mail, I had a strange feeling. It didn't feel natural, but then it was too late. Diarrhea, booty made a booty. Diarrhea.
It's needless to say so far that Khord is not only a very obnoxious person, but also just a straight up weird one through and through. The way he goes about making posts give off that kind of vibe, like talking about how he's apparently a relative of Abraham Lincoln, how his great-great-grandma is Native American, and how his great-grandfather might be a mafia boss or something. It's all just really weird. He even has a post about how distant relatives from over 400 years ago married at a suspect age, which is something nobody really cares to talk about or bring up unless you're an eccentric weird person in general. That's not to mention the kind of people he affiliates himself with, like Growly, and while gross, there's still some sort of tinge of entertainment watching all this go down. Of course, things would get from weird to concerning, because as we all know by now, these kind of people tend to follow a familiar path in due time. Before Khord met Deb, she had a rabbit named Alun that was aggressive to anyone except for her for one reason or another. They would eventually rehome it a few months later because of this, as seen on Twitter. Khord seemed to never like the rabbit at all, as some leaked messages show him joking around with someone about feeding it to an animal at a nearby farm. Now this is mainly just a crude joke about an animal he didn't get along with, so nothing here was malicious or anything like that just yet. Deb will end up getting a new dog named Hagao for Khord's birthday in 2016, and things were looking good at first. However, post-divorce Deb would come to Kiwi Farms and say that in April 2020, Khord had allegedly let the dog lick him in places and even did the deed with him before. But given there's no evidence and these are very serious claims to make, it's best to write these off as ramblings from a vengeful former lover trying to get custody of her kids, just like how she says prior to that paragraph. The reason to believe she might be lying gets stronger because people will find screenshots from December 2019 of Khord trying to rehome the dog, before eventually getting his roommate to take care of him from now on. However, an email dated March 2020 would show Deb asking Khord to cough up $800 if he wants the dog back, and then in August 2020 Khord would get Hagao back, with the first message showing Deb telling him about it and how she'd do whatever she can to beat him in court, and then another message from Deb's former roommate claiming she took Hagao from Khord out of spite and collateral the past December. Someone would also allege that Khord crushed a rat, but the only evidence of anything related to that would be when he talked about his dog killing a rat and having it on video, so who knows what really happened. Seeing that Deb took the dog and used her as collateral makes her claims against Khord lawless and malicious, and given this was post-divorce, that feeling was exaggerated significantly. People will look into Deb more, in which they'll find a lot of interesting stuff, such as having her son around someone named Bamani Cub, and as we know by now, the word cub in the furry fandom doesn't have a very pleasant connotation to it. This will lead people finding out that Khord had commissioned cub artwork of his own son, and even tried to bring him to an actual baby fur meetup, only stopping because a bunch of people told him that he was insane and it could be very awkward. He would also be found following a handful of cub accounts on Twitter, and instead of addressing any of this properly, he would instead make jokes about it, fully aware of people knowing about this. He would continue to make uncomfortable jokes involving his very own son on Telegram, and when first joining Kiwi Farms in March 2019 would argue with them saying that he calls his own son a real baby fur as a joke and nothing more, that he attended a baby fur party before and that was weird but fun, and ends things off saying it was just a fun little subcategory of furries and nothing more, also showing off another baby fur pic he commissioned of his second son that was born recently. He would clarify his belief that he doesn't think it's a fetish in any way at all later on that day, and 2 days later would say that he asked a baby fur if it was a fetish, and obviously they said it wasn't, much to the shock of people reading this trying to take him seriously. He even straight up admitted that he wanted to bring his kids to a baby fur meetup on Kiwi Farms too, still trying to run with the story that they're just misunderstood people to all the users watching everything go down. A year into arguing with the users constantly, someone would bring up that he still wanted to do so when replying to him, and Khord would try to lie and say that he never had the idea and it was actually a super complex joke that nobody on the website would understand. People set him straight pretty quick, bringing up an old Twitter post of his, and he would back down after realizing they caught him trying to straight up lie to everyone reading. Deb would also make a comment in March 2020 when the Kiwi Farms thread went live about him arguing with random people on the forum, but has since changed her tune post-divorce because she really wants to get the kids away from him. On August 28, 2021, someone in a chat he was in would get banned for being in a Cub chat, and Khord would downplay this as being in a chat that encouraged bad behavior, saying that people should encourage good behavior instead of some sort of weird, subtle, almost offensive approach to the subject. Khord would then straight up lie again in June 2022 about trying to bring his son to a baby fur meetup, now saying it was actually an idea from Dogpatch Press to have a family-friendly event at the convention. If you remember, the Twitter post admitting it was in early 2018, and the Dogpatch article he linked was posted December 2019, meaning that Khord is again lying and grasping for any straws he can as more and more people learn of that story and his true nature. Of course, it comes to no one's surprise that Khord has also gotten artwork of his own character as a baby fur and followed a couple Cub artists on Ink Bunny, also being mentioned in a baby fur chat at one point in time in Telegram. While there's no hard evidence of him being in the chat itself, it's more than likely given the constant defense he runs for baby furs and his own fascination with them. That includes tweets making reference to them going as far back as a decade ago, and even making a whole song dedicated to baby furs that he performed at a FurCon in 2015 called Crinkle Wag. It became pretty obvious that all this baby fur defense is just one giant form of cognitive dissonance from a man who can't admit he's the one in the wrong and instead has to lie to everyone when it's convenient. He's even been in contact with a slew of known zoophiles and pedos, such as Nacho Doggo here and trying to get a room with Growly at one point, and has gone on to run defense for RC Fox when he ended himself after getting caught with CP in what can only be described as insane ignorance at best. Khord also has a peculiar looking F list which shows off his interests, with one being zoophilia to nobody's surprise. He would actually update the list when the Kiwi Farms thread on him went live in March 2020, adding and removing things, yet still kept zoo around on his favorites knowing the connotations that it holds. He would say he hadn't seen his F list since 2012, but in the original picture before he updated it, you can see it was logged in around 3.5 years ago, meaning the last time he was on it was sometime in fall 2016 and he was again lying to the users. He would get caught having a website in his bookmarks that leads to a text document explaining how to do dogs. He would go on to claim that he was sent the link and found it so interesting someone would even try to downplay their mental sickness as something not disgusting. However, in leaked DMs he would say he found out about the link when looking up something else, so it seems like he was lying again to people to try to get heat off his back. He also had 2 gore sites in his bookmarks too, so make of that whatever you will. On March 12, 2022, Khord had appeared in a livestream with 2 people named Cass Warfox and Coyote Lovely, in which he would explain the F-list account as some sort of pseudo-character roleplay and try to imply it can't be used against him because it doesn't pertain to his real life but only fantasy according to his viewpoint.
But when I see F-list, I assume that you have a fetish for animals.
And that's not, no, first off, F-list is not about the fetishes that somebody has. It has to do with role-playing and only role-playing.
He was also a member of the Cats NSFW Telegram channel at one point in time, a channel that has a multitude of people posting feral NSFW art of cats. He would say that he sometimes watches videos of cats doing each other, and then fantasizes about a real cat he saw having experiences with other cats. When called out about this, he would lie to someone not too familiar with the story that he was actually fantasizing about anthropomorphic cats when that's clearly not the case. And when called out about it with Cass and Coyote Lovely, he would try to avoid the question as it kept pushing on with the mess.
On that subject, why don't you bring up why you actually watched cat mating videos back in 2018, screenshot related in the chat?
Because I had a YouTube binge where I was fascinated by the fact that like it was well, I mean, if I get too detailed, again, I'm sort of afraid, like, okay, what if a minor is watching this stream? That's what I'm genuinely worried about, because obviously talking about stuff like this is it could hurt their brains. Like, do we know that this audience to the stream is all adults, or is it a PG-13?
Yeah, it really feels like you just want to avoid the questions. That's what you've been doing a lot this stream and in the call previously.
Hold on, look.
Khord has also said that his mom showed him a beast video to him once and that was apparently funny to him, and given his mom was a photographer for horse races, this didn't sound too far from reality. In that stream with Cass and Coyote Lovely, he would defend himself by giving more context to the clip, claiming it was actually a comedic video akin to a sort of mild Twitter shot clip.
But you have to be patient, because obviously there's a lot of stuff, so with
how? I'm confused. How?
So with that one particular comment, one thing I realized was I forgot to talk about the part where the woman was sitting on a bench while this was happening and fell backwards. And that's why it was funny, because it was like instant karma. But that part I neglected to leave in But I think what happened was I was visualizing it, and this was like before YouTube. Like there would be the way you'd find funny videos is there'd be these basically a whole bunch of videos you could download on these different pages, and they were all just whatever craziness, and every once in a while they might have like some sort of a funny pornography, like kind of like outtakes, like pornography outtakes. And that's basically what that was from. But yeah, like if you were to read that comment, it doesn't say anything about a bench, it was either a bench breaking or I think that the lady fell backwards. It doesn't say anything about that. So that's how that misunderstanding popped up. But
during the situation with Deb alleging that he did his dog to everyone on Kiwi Farms, his family is also apparently aware of it too, as he says both his mother and sister laughed at the absurdity going on, which, given the lack of evidence to that claim, certainly does sound like one of those rare plausible things that could have happened. Khord has also gone on record to talk about age differences in a negative light before, such as someone going to jail for trying to meet up with somebody, and even talk about the Jason effect situation. Jason was also apparently in Khord's private Telegram chat and started talking really suspect about children at one point, but given anyone can impersonate anyone on Telegram and the fact the messages seem a little out of character even for him, that's gonna stay in the skeptical part of that situation for now. These stances that Khord holds seem noble at first, except given how this video has gone thus far, you probably have an idea and an answer to why this is being brought up right now. It turns out to no one's surprise that in 2014, Khord is in contact with the 17-year-old girl when he was 27. The leaked messages come from Facebook and read from bottom to top soon after meeting up somewhere, with the girl commenting on how they were cuddling together while watching a movie. She would talk about herself to him as he wouldn't even try to steer the conversation in a different direction or tell her not to talk that way to an adult like himself, including talking about how he'll listen to her when she asks to look at a certain body part, with the girl even showing fear and stuff going down between them as he keeps the conversation going instead of immediately stopping it and telling her that this is wrong. The girl would even tell him that he needs to pretend he's 20 in case he meets her mother, with him not objecting to this idea because he likes her too much. They would meet up together on April 17, 2014. Khord would say it was successful, even if a bit awkward given some of the questions they had, and then it would come out that he exposed himself to her during all this. He would talk about doing the deed with her, get NSFW art of their characters together, offer to give her his bad dragon toy to borrow, and when bringing up that he was hitting on another girl, she would get jealous, showing just how attached she had become to Khord. He would send this link to her and they would talk miscellaneously for the next few months, including him talking about an idea involving paying for things with their own body. She would show her discomfort to him as he kept going on about it. He would say he chats with 3,000 furries monthly to her, and then when she asks if he can get her some drugs, he, as expected, doesn't shut down the conversation and instead tells her to contact him through Skype about where to find shrooms as the leaks end. When Khord was confronted about all this, he would say that it wasn't a crime because she asked him to flash her first, say actually he's a teleophile instead to defend himself, ask what crime he was being accused of while also stating that a Californian police officer saw the logs and said he was good legally, and then uses some sort of rule to say it was all good because she's half his age plus 7 years. However, if you notice, he uses their current ages when applying this logic, so either he was just trying to epically own the Kiwi farmers again by using the current ages and is just dumb, or he's been in contact with a girl he groomed since 2014, otherwise why bring up the current ages instead of 27 and 17 like how they first met? As this news had become more widespread in 2022, he would hit up someone on Twitter asking them for advice to understand what he did was wrong. This led to an insanely long exchange between the two, including lines from Khord about how his parents were reading the very messages themselves despite being a 35-year-old grown-ass man at that point in time, and how it was technically illegal according to state law for him to base everything off of that. He then claims that people trying to get him to end it all and that they'll go after his children next. Again points out that it was perfectly legal if they did something together given state law, and mentions his 10-year age gap formula that he came up with to carry himself throughout life that he became known for talking about. The chatter would rage at him for the sheer insanity of the situation at hand when seeing his parents are involved. Khord would mention that he's still friends with her even to today, and again talk about his kids and wanting to use this as a lesson for them in the future. There is more to this exchange, but it's mostly just raging and stuff we already know, and this only showed how into now he was of what he did to her by still bringing up law as defense when this is clearly a moral situation that he does not understand whatsoever. More people would come out talking about their experiences with the man, all which had them being young teenagers, such as hanging around a group of them at furry cons, talking to someone he met on YouTube when they were around 12 years old and how in hindsight it was very creepy, and even another person he chatted with when they were around 16 or 17. Someone would even say that he was hanging around them alone at a furry con when they were 16 and would even show a handful of screenshots to boot, adding a lot of credibility to their claims about the man. Khord would even participate in a dance competition hosted by 2 teenagers. Some people come to Kiwi Farms and say they met him when they were 15, and another said he used to lurk a Skype chat and add people as friends through it, adding yet even more teenagers to the count. He would even make a sick joke about a kid hugging a fursuit, which is a fursuit they do each other in, and when asked about his opinion on the age of consent in April 2022, this is what he had to say.
Okay, so what do you think the age of consent should be across the US?
I would say that wait a minute. Well, honestly, like the way things are, I'm okay with that.
Okay, with what?
What?
With
You didn't answer
the
the
way the
question.
laws are.
Well, okay, what is the current law?
Yeah,
What's the current... No, wait, hold on. Wait, what's the current law?
Well, yeah, what is it?
It's 18, and that's applying basically to, like, let's say if there's something that happens like across state lines, something along those lines. But that obviously that's a law that is only applied through the states if something is happening within the state, of course. But you know.
Excuse me, that was a non-answer. That was a non-fucking answer. Give me an age.
You kind of dodged the question.
Yeah, you dodged it. Give me an age. 1 through 18.
I'll just say I don't care. I have no opinion.
You don't?
I don't care. I don't care.
The fact he couldn't answer in fear of backlash shows at the very least he's becoming a little self-aware, but still, after everything we learned about the guy, that is a very concerning clip to hear, and only shows you just how far gone this guy is. It's extremely clear that Khord has a severe problem understanding the way he acts is wrong, and that led to him preying on a 17-year-old girl in the process when he was 27. He truly doesn't understand what he did was wrong, and even to this day still doesn't, either because he doesn't want to lose an argument and admit he was wrong, is extremely daft in the head, or perhaps a little bit of both. He defended trying to bring his very own son to a baby for a meetup and lied about it until people caught him red-handed and he had no way to get himself out of it, and has since then tried to change the story that it was a planned meetup for furries with kids despite the article of note being newer than at the con it happened at. It's also strange because whenever he reaches out to people and asks them to give him advice, he either tries to justify his actions or argue his way out of it instead of listening to what they're saying to him. His situation with Deb doesn't help either, because as we've seen, she seems to be a bit vindictive in her own ways, and that divorce they have going on has its very own story to be told. Now, as we've seen, Khord and Deb have been bickering post-divorce trying to ruin each other's lives, with Khord naming a handful of things that Deb has said about him, including stuff like showing his kids NSFW images among a handful of other very serious claims to make about someone. Leaked Telegram DMs showed Khord claiming that Deb didn't strap his kid in and that they fell in the street, and that she apparently slapped him after he asked her to keep an eye on the kid when he worked on the lawn. Deb would claim this is actually because he allowed their kid to play outside without shoes despite people putting down ant spray, meaning someone here is lying about one another, but we'll never know for certain. Khord has also listed a couple more things that Deb accused him of in some more leaked DMs, even going on about the grooming situation but trying to downplay it once more because he's insane. Deb would respond to a question about the drowning incident in which he says that Khord basically waterboarded their kid when bathing him once, that she had to intervene to stop him from doing so. An email will leak out from a social worker or nanny that accompanied Khord and his 2 kids to the mall, in which she goes over how Khord is haphazardly following one of the kids around the food court while distracted on the phone, and left the other in the stroller all alone in the play area. That kid would eventually start crying, and it took him a couple minutes to notice before he gave him a bottle and walked away again, only changing the kids after she reminded him, and that he never even fed the one in the stroller during the entire 6.5-hour stay. He would imply that they had financial reasons to lie about him but fail to back it up with any evidence, saying that everyone's privacy is the biggest priority to him, even though he's gone on record saying that his personal safety and reputation are the most important, so whatever. Khord would say he's only paid a couple hundred on child support in July 2020, and then more leaks from Deb's Telegram account would show that one of his kids was hospitalized and he never bothered to show up to check on him. When questioned about this, he would say he was caught up with sleep and work, but then people found out the hospital in question was only 2 miles away, meaning he truly didn't show up because he didn't feel like it and nothing more. Deb would continue to make a lot of serious claims about Khord, like how he left one of their kids in the garage unattended for 4 hours and came home to them in a mess, claimed that he destroyed her diary 2 weeks into their marriage after all the weird stuff he did, and that he was very neglectful with the kids, such as feeding them weird foods like blueberries and whipped cream, implies that he forced himself upon her, and says that he started doing his own roommate in front of her kids at one point. He is known for feeding his kids weird food, such as putting cheese and tomato sauce in a tortilla and calling it a pizza, but everything else is again very serious stuff that she never elaborates on or provides any evidence to, so it's worth taking that with a grain of salt. Throughout all this, Khord is also very against getting any therapy for himself, arguing with someone in DMs when they recommended it to him. He tries to say that he's extremely good at communicating his emotions while also stating he has a healthy relationship with his family and co-workers, when everyone at this point knows that's just straight up denial or ignorance coming from him. In fact, up to that point, the last time he ever went to therapy was 2 decades ago, and that was because of losing out on honor choir in his high school. It's clear he views therapy in a very negative light, and that mentality has bled into the way he raises his kids, as one of them has autism and he would get upset whenever Deb would bring him to a therapist to help him understand himself better. He would even claim that Deb has Munchausen syndrome by proxy, naming instances of what can be minor mistakes in determining if a child is injured or not, rather than intentionally exaggerating them for the sake of bringing attention to herself. Of course, he would also let a straight-up heroin addict live in the house with his kids, with Deb calling the police as soon as she found out, talking with what can be presumed as a mutual friend of theirs trying to de-escalate things as she rants about him and her kids' safety. She even said that he once left pills on the floor in an attempt to frame her as a bad mother, alongside sending out-of-context pictures to their child's therapist in similar fashion. Deb would also claim that he went to the Further Confusion convention in 2020 using his kid's birthday and Christmas money. Khord was known for updating his Wikifur page of all the cons he's been to, and at the time there was no instance of the 2020 con being listed. It turns out he was planning for this for a while, as in a group chat he would mention trying to move his fursuit to his father's house as it was near the con, and would then post a picture on his Facebook account a few months later confirming so. He even inserted himself into the story about furries who beat up a domestic abuser in the usual attention-seeking nature he's become well known for.
Even though we're in animal costumes, we got some humanity as well. I mean, I think it's also just sort of a natural thing to just want to help somebody in need.
In an interview with the Khorders on April 7th, 2022, Khord is talking about beast and pedo stuff, when all of a sudden you can hear his kids in the background, meaning that he was freely talking about these explicit subjects in front of his own kids like it was no big deal to him.
There was recently a controversy with Further Confusion. They had a DJ lined up who had a mate who was a zoophile. And the fact that the entire con was totally okay with it, the fact that I think Rocky Mountain Fur Con had like a chairman who was also a convicted offender, I think it kind of... so I think it kind of...
do you have your kid here? Is he in your house at the moment?
Am I to understand you have some sort of issue with the furry fandom, I assume?
I gotta go, I'm sorry.
Bruh.
We all heard his kid.
Yeah, we all heard that.
How unfortunate.
As soon as the kid's brought up, he immediately shits himself.
Oh.
He shouldn't be talking about this shit around his kids, but whatever.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm not a parent.
Finally, he's taking care of his kid for once.
He's even gone on to say that podcast should have labeled things properly, as minors could have been exposed to adult topics, yet was talking about that stuff right in front of his own kids, showing just how hypocritical this man can be. Khord has said that his now therapist told him to keep posting and arguing on kiwi farms for some reason, yet has also said before all this that all legal parties said not to do this, which is yet another case of his lying nature coming in full force. He's gone on to accuse pretty much everyone against him of death threats, yet only providing one set of evidence of what can be assumed to be Deb talking to another person who threatened him because of certain reasons, and providing the supposed case slip that was given out by the San Jose Police Department involved in the incident. He even had his own things to say about Deb, such as her apparently dragging a child across concrete one time in fear similar abuse could happen to their kid, her being a member in the Wet Ferals Telegram channel, which you can figure out the content involved rather easily, and rumors of her leaving her kids with random strangers at furry conventions in some leaked DMs. At one point confronting someone she knew close through text, implying that they were aligned and that their friendship was over. Khord has even gone on to say that she was always working and rarely hung around the kids, and that it was detrimental to their development. Things would go extremely south, as it would come out that the person Deb got with after breaking up with Khord was none other than Kalu, the furry cub and CP artist from earlier. In fact, Kalu here was much more involved in their lives than one might realize, as it turns out that he was the one who got them their dog Hago back in 2016, as seen by leaked Telegram messages of Khord admitting exactly that, alongside rumors of him messing with real dogs to the surprise of nobody. They would even get a hotel room together at a furry con sometime in 2017, and it turns out that Deb and Kalu got together only 2 weeks after her divorce with Khord. His name would come up in the Zoo Status leaks of 2018 in a not so unexpected crossover event. Deb would try to get him to wipe Khord's hard drive because she feared he had evidence against her he could use in court during their child custody battle. Khord was also apparently trying to date Noodle Scoop from the Zoo Status leaks too, and Kalu was seen in this picture right here with their 2 kids, much to the horror of everyone keeping up with the story so far. They would eventually break up in February 2020 after Deb found out he was in an orgy and felt betrayed by him, though Deb did say at first on Kiwi Farms that they never dated before and tried to imply she had no idea what they were talking about, before changing her tune after being made aware of his past artworks by users on the site later on down the line. Now, whether or not you believe that Deb knew she was dating a pedo is up to you, but to give a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, Khord himself has said she's a workaholic, and it's within reason she just never had the time to look him up beyond just knowing him first as Khord's friend and eventual lover. Either way, it makes her one hell of a story, and Kalu himself would eventually get exposed by a multitude of people for being a massive creep who preyed on them for his own pleasure in early 2023. That which includes a 17-year-old at one point, to the surprise of literally nobody watching this video. Khord and his financial situation wasn't anything better either, as people find out that he was the legal owner of the house with Deb, and that after divorce she had to move to San Diego and failed to get him evicted because it was his name on the deed and not hers, causing her to file for bankruptcy in the process, among other things. When questioned about his pay, Khord said that he makes $5,200 a month before taxes, but people found that fishy, so they started doing some hard digging. Khord said that he worked on luxury cars before, and people would eventually find out it was a Tesla factory in California after he was on kiwi farms using the company's Wi-Fi to argue with people. Khord would say that he was a forklift operator, and after doing the proper research and math, they would find out he's making $500 less than what he said. And given his lying and hypocritical nature, people didn't give him the benefit of the doubt and write it off as a small mistake. That's on top of him also renting out his place and making money doing all that too. Yet during a court hearing on October 28, 2020, it would actually get cancelled because he apparently was unemployed and had no money to give for child support, according to Deb herself. After hearing all this, Kiwi Farms users would do what they normally do and dig into the past to get a timeline of his financial history to figure out the truth behind this madness. Soon after Deb moved out of the house, he would try to get roommates to fill in the gaps on August 8, 2019, going as far to join a new Telegram channel to try and convince anyone to help him out as he was desperate to make enough money for the mortgage. On October 9th, he would be so broke he had his legal fees in court waived, meaning at this time he was struggling for quite a bit. He would get his job at the Tesla factory on December 2nd, start living at his dad's place, and seem to have rented out his house already within that very week. On February 23, 2020, he would ask for advice on how to refinance his house. And on March 25th, he would complain about people not co-signing on his property, which if you ask me, was a very smart choice they made. He would also try to commission artwork for his furry character despite being broke and struggling with money the very next day too, which doesn't really line up with him being supposedly broke during this time. Khord would end up getting furloughed from Tesla on April 1st, and an article a week later stating exactly that would come out, adding credibility to his post. However, he would end up getting his job back just a month later on May 12th, and on October 9th he would make a post saying he's working 58 hours a week, meaning he's making decent money by this point. The court hearing of course would be cancelled on October 28th because he said he was broke. Deb would speculate that he's lying to the judge, and then just a few days later on November 3rd he would say he's about to work a 66-hour work week soon. On November 19th he would claim to be working a 70-hour work week and that he's apparently paid $15,000 in legal fees so far, and in January 2021 would start to post on Twitter asking people if they can make him a VR chat avatar for him, as well as asking for what VR headset he should buy. He would even make a post just 2 months later that implies a regretful purchase based off the wording alone, which as you can imagine only infuriated Deb even more as he avoided paying child support and was instead buying whatever the hell he felt like. Khord would end up selling the house in California on October 7th later that year, and Deb would make a post saying she got half the profit, so at least she ended up getting some of the money off his name I suppose. There was also this instance on April 10th, 2022 when he got into a spat with a random Twitter user, and while most of it is stuff we already know already, there are a few things worth noting. He goes on his typical rant about how everyone is out to get him for no reason according to his skewed viewpoint, bring up Coyote Lovely after it started becoming a known thing that he was living with zoophile and predator Ziarcalo at the time, show that he talks to other zoophiles to try and get dirt on Coyote because they hate him that much, and that it's the newer generation trying to take him down and the typical lack of self-awareness that we've become accustomed to seeing from this man. There's also this entire section dedicated to proving that it was Khord on Kiwi Farms after they found out he was lying to the judge about his internet presence, which to sum it up shortly, does its job and then some for good measure. It's very easy to see here that Khord is quite the individual to both outsiders and within the furry fandom itself, and even though he seemed to always peer his head around every corner, his reputation wasn't great unlike how he tries to paint it to everyone who speaks to him. As his name started to become more and more known within general internet circles, there would be more people that look into him and his entire mess, and in doing so would find out even more unknown information about the man, this time including evidence that would not bode well with the furry fandom. Now, Khord has gone on record saying that he was banned from a handful of group chats when he first started posting on Kiwi Farms, and even at one point admitted to sending 40 people the same copy-pasted message about his marriage being open now and ready for cuddles, getting banned from even more chats in the process. Someone from the Stockton Furs Telegram chat even corroborated this, saying that he was just really weird and sent out a mass message to people just like what he admitted earlier, before banning him from the constant complaints and general creepiness the guy gave off. He's even talked about this before in other chats, saying that it's the other people causing issues, failing to realize how creepy he is, and again showing off the lack of self-awareness he has. He would get banned from the Bay Area furry jobs chat after people were made aware of his creepiness and the current drama surrounding his name, arguing about it in his own chat and editing the messages in the process to try and change his argument to set himself up in a more sympathetic light. On August 9th, 2021, Khord would get banned from the NSFW Bay First chat for reasons we'll get into shortly, and the same would happen a few weeks later on the 25th in the Bay Area housing chat. On September 4th, he would get banned after joining the Bay Area's Furball chat for impeding on the admin's personal boundaries and likely because of other reasons as well. People started to become more vocal about their disdain for him as someone would be added to a chat and immediately start to talk shit to him once they noticed he was there before leaving shortly after. He would actually respond to this little situation, blowing it off as people just starting drama for no reason and whatnot as he tried to move on from things. He would get banned from the unofficial chat of the Further Confusion convention on January 3rd, 2022, with people talking about him after they were made aware of how weird he is. Khord would get instantly banned from a furry dating group on January 12th after someone recognized him and dropped his key farm thread for others to see for themselves, and then got banned from the Rochester First chat for what he said was no reason at all when talking about him on Twitter, only being in there for a total of 2 days as people looked into that further. It turns out they banned him under the suspicion of DMing a minor, and knowing about his past they wanted nothing to do with him and promptly blocked him and kicked him out. He seems to have this habit of interacting with minors as we talked about prior, so to see a bunch of chats and even adults know about him means that word is getting around and his internet antics and whatever he gets himself into. Khord has even proudly shown off his spammy nature on Twitter before when shown his Skype chat logs at one point in time back in 2014. What makes this screenshot so interesting is that there's a certain person just below the message he has highlighted, and some former viewers on the channel may recognize this as Foxler, a Nazi furry who's part of the alt-furry side of the fandom, the Furry Raiders group. He's claimed to have known Foxler since 2010 after mass DMing a bunch of people who had Skype accounts on Fur Affinity. He's even known another person from the alt-furry side named Canine Lupine since 2010, has publicly spoken and mentioned him on Twitter a few times before, and even bragged about how all his roommates out of FurryCon in 2015 happened to be Furry Raiders. There was even a podcast together on October 25th, 2017, and while most of it is nothing important, there are a few interesting quotes, like Khord admitting he knew Foxler before he was famous, having one of his kids around Foxler at a FurryCon, and Foxler being anti-Semitic.
You and oh boy, Foxler, I've known you for before you were famous, let's just say.
Well, unless people went to that one con, how could it affect anybody?
Like, yeah. Well, I mean, I went to BLFC. That was interesting. That's where I met Khord again. Just like randomly, I'm just walking there, and then he's like with his stroller and then kid. I'm just like, oh, when did this happen?
December 30th, just for the record, December 30th.
Is that when it happened or when?
And then, like, actually, right before I had him take a picture with my baby, he said that someone said "F you" at the elevator, and I was like, wow. And you would say you have absolutely full respect for the family and relative and survivors of the Holocaust and suffering that they've been through.
I would. My knowledge is limited to that. I don't know how to be put in a position like that.
Well, at least you're honest. It's good you're honest, you know? That's all people could really ask of you.
This wouldn't go down very well for him, judging by the dislikes, and word is spread around even to his Fur Affinity page as people would argue with him about why he would ever invite Foxler into his podcast. Of course, Khord's affiliation with the Furry Raiders would go deeper as he would appear in another podcast by them on October 13, 2018, this time with another member named Avaria. This one is even more uneventful than the last and is mostly just miscellaneous stuff, save for one part, and that's when Khord said this right here.
Oh gosh, someone said a naughty question. I'm not going to read that. I'm trying to keep, my baby's right next to me, so I want to try to keep it nice and, I was about to say PC, but nice and...
Oh, joy. Why would you ask this?
He would eventually end up on a block list on Twitter 2 years later as more and more people learned of his close ties with this group of people. In 2020, a massive leak of Telegram chats would come out proving Khord's affiliation with these people some more alongside some other stuff. The first chat would be PMF Furries, a group Khord made after he started getting banned from those Californian chats we mentioned earlier, in which he would talk about how 2 members were exposed for affiliating themselves with the alt furries and being conflicted on what to do with them, ultimately not banning them despite the obvious message that was sent to outsiders. He would roleplay with the VR in the chat at one point in time, and later on they would talk about RC Fox and mention he was their best friend in the somber tone despite the guy being a pedo who game ended before heading to jail. Kenny Lupine would even get invited to the chat at one point in early 2022, again showing how deep Khord runs with these alt furry groups. Old School Furries would be the next chat, with Khord joining it on November 14th, 2020 after seeing most of them are around his age. The chat is mostly just boring political ranting and nothing more, like how he would get blocked trying to debate people about the transgender bathroom issue and some rather expected ranting about how the media controls everything. Of course it doesn't help that Canine Lupine and another known alt-furry person named Lane Gilbert are present, but this isn't anything new at this point in history, it's just part of the way Khord is. He would end up leaving sometime in February 2022 after getting called out on Twitter, yet on March 3rd he would join and leave almost instantly in what can be assumed as accidentally rejoining after watching the chat for some reason. He's also seen in a dissident Furs chat run by Len Gilbert, and only these 2 posts came out of it as it's hidden behind a join wall and hard to get into unless he knows someone. The Terrible to Box chat is basically the same stuff we've seen already, just in another chat with a handful of more alt-furries, and the only new thing here is him complaining about Kiwi Farms and how they keep getting him banned from other chats as people learn more about him and his personal ties. Also, more confirmation of his ties with Canine Lupine in February 2022, but this is old news at this point, so there's no need to stress it that much. He would also join the free-for-all unofficial chat as well, but leave rather soon as people kept spreading the news about him everywhere, only to join back 10 days later after supposedly doing whatever he needed to. Now, despite this almost decade's worth of known creepy behavior involving anyone he can talk to, grooming a minor 10 years younger than him, and the multitude of miscellaneous dangerous positions he put his own kids through, it was his politics and ties to the alt-furries that led to any controversy from within the furry fandom, as the Twitter account will compile all this info in a thread and post it on January 26, 2022 for everyone to see. This will cause people to find a 3-year-old thread going over what we mostly know already, but did include some new stuff like him going off on Facebook about more heavy political things that would most certainly cause some controversy on that side of the internet. With this newfound infamy, people start to trash on Khord some more, eventually getting him kicked out of yet another Telegram group chat. People find a post from earlier that month of him complaining about people spreading misinfo about him around despite this being warranted and based in reality, and even some other miscellaneous stuff like putting BLM in his bio because a random person happened to go to a furry con and he liked their YouTube video. They would even find out that earlier that month he joined a chat called Exposing Furs, complained about how people are lying about him and whatnot to the people who are willing to listen to him, only for them to find out his interest in feral art and getting blocked after calling him out on his act. He would try to say that he can't possibly be racist because his second great-grandfather was black and try to point out that he's part Jewish so he can't be anti-Semitic either despite hanging around the alt-furries for so long. Khord would begin to argue with a lot of people on Twitter, so many would completely drown out this part of the video. A couple highlights include trying to downplay him hanging around the alt-furries as nothing more than joining the chat and trying to equate the hatred against him as high school drama, trying to get on the good side of a group of people that clearly dislike him, saying that people are defaming him to someone who just learned about him and his actions, trying to guilt trip someone who banned him from their chat and saying he's done nothing wrong, lies about not knowing who RC Fox is because he knows it makes him look bad, and even joining groups outside the US to try and escape the ridicule he's been getting. More people come out about Khord and how he constantly tries to talk to them despite being teenagers of varying ages going about, and one person would even post screenshots having to do with this showing they met up together as well. People find another art piece of him and his child together, and to put it lightly, his reputation was officially in the gutter and then some. Despite the literally decades worth of info about him making its way to the mainstream public, he would somehow end up on a finalist list for the dance competition at the BLFC 2022 Furry Convention. Someone would organize a walkout protest because of this, and it would come out he was also lurking around a 12-year-old at a furry convention a few years back to the surprise of nobody. Someone would even claim that they had to stop bringing their service dog to cons because Khord would constantly harass him, and he would try to argue with the one person spreading the news around to no avail as it was far too late to save his reputation. In an actually surprising moment, Khord would be mass booed throughout the entire duration of his dance act when that time came, with viewers of the livestream able to hear them despite the music playing.
Our next dancer is Khord Kitty! Khord Kitty!
This news would make its way around Twitter as people tuned in for the dumpster fire, and Khord himself would maul about the situation as it became more and more mainstream. People would question how he's even able to join the dance competition despite his known history, and a judge would say that he somehow joined after the submission list was closed, which is a proven fact as Khord himself made a post trying to do exactly that just a few weeks prior. He will continue to maul both on his Telegram channel and on Twitter to no one's surprise, even inserting himself into situations whenever he sees his name brought up because he can't help it, and to top it all off, didn't even place in the dance competition, making this entire escapade a waste of his time alongside ruining his reputation some more. On July 20th, 2022, Khord would get caught talking with Growly once again in a group chat planning a movie meetup, so people start to berate him more for being so stupid and insane for hanging around a known pedo, with Khord saying that the meets are just so important to him and provide solace in his life, much to the shock of the viewers reading the chat that very moment. He would say that he actually never met up with him, people post proof of that happening, and he would then try to shift the tone and say it was just a copy-pasted message as nobody was falling for his lies. He would then try to pass things off as a joke, but then left the chat as nobody was falling for nothing and he realized he couldn't keep lying his way out of this mess he created for himself. Khord would also end up flirting with none other than hypnotist Sappho sometime in September 2022 with her first season in a chat she owned. She would then drop the screenshots, showing him flirting with her, talking about movies and role-playing together, and straight up saying that he loves her as she reciprocates back. Sappho and Khord would continue to miscellaneously flirt with each other, but things would go south once Khord found out she was transgender and states he can't do a relationship now. Mind you, not because she's a pedo-zoophile predator groomer, but because she was trans. He would then wipe the chat clean in expected fashion. Sappho would brag about screenshotting everything, and Khord would try to shift things by saying it was all just one big gay up he was trying to run, and he definitely wasn't falling for one of the most heinous people that I've ever covered on my YouTube channel. On December 10th, Khord would appear in an interview on YouTube, an interview that has unfortunately been lost to time due to the user deleting their channel. Luckily, after reaching out to certain people, they helped me find a few clips of it, and let's just say that the interview is surely something to behold. It turns out that the 17-year-old Khord groomed back on Facebook years ago joined the interview to set the record straight, telling Khord himself that what he did was wrong and they were sick of him trying to downplay everything.
There is no way that you can sit there and say that these chat logs have been edited. There's no way. At the end of the day, yes, I was the legal age of consent for New York, which is 17, yes. But at the end of the day, I was not 18. And at the end of the day, I was going through a lot of trauma, and you knew that. The stuff that you were talking about in those logs, you should not be saying that anybody that's 17 or under the age of 18 at all, especially given the age gap between us. But for you to sit there and say that those chat logs are edited and people are saying things about you that are not true, I don't know about the other allegations. But as far as the allegation concerning me and those chat logs, those are very real.
They will keep going on about how Khord always shifts the blame onto others instead of accepting he's the problem before the clip ends.
But what I did not like is that with certain situations that you were bringing up or people were, you know, asking you the right questions of why this was happening or why did you say this a certain way to get the context, that instead of you really just saying, hey, listen, I messed up, whatever, you shifted a lot of blame. I'm not saying that I'm not going to say me at 17, you're right, that's the legal age of consent, but I'm not going to sit there and say that I was some higher party. At the end of the day, I was a kid. I was a teenager. You were an adult. There's no way in the sense of form that you could have sat there and said that, oh, what I'm doing is cool.
The next clip has Khord responding saying that they weren't a victim of real grooming, spitting in their face right at them.
Yes. But I want to say something else. This is belittling real victims of child grooming and real victims of child grooming. There's something terrifying about real groomers, and I've had the opportunity to sack one of the staff members of Anthrocon because I forwarded real child grooming evidence to no, it was someone else, but
about Grizzly the medic.
I just want to say conversations like this belittle real victims of child grooming. Leon, you're not in any way a victim of child grooming, and that's disgusting.
May I respond?
You want to abuse it. You want to abuse that
may
word.
I respond?
It's horrific. You are belittling every single victim of child.
Khord then tries to bring up the fact they were a former drug dealer at Epically Onum, in which they would reply they only sold to those their age and had to do it in order to make ends meet given their living situation before that clip ends.
Dealt drugs to children. You have no moral hierarchy above me, okay? You have no moral hierarchy above me when you deal drugs to children. You understand that?
Civility.
You understand that? I just want to make sure you understand that. That's it.
I'm not going to lie. In high school, I was homeless in a shelter with my family, and I needed to make extra money. That's the bottom line. My mom knew nothing of what I was doing. I didn't sell hardcore drugs. I did sell weed, and I will admit to that. But I also was the same age of the people I was selling to. That doesn't make it okay.
The last clip has them talking to Khord about their Facebook DMs and asking if they ever thought they were creepy in hindsight, in which he says no.
If you decided to look back at the log and you saw the conversation we were having and how, to not mess up with the stream or any monetization, how spicy the chat was, is it not creepy? Can you at least say that?
In my personal opinion, it was not creepy. And
okay.
But the reason being is because it was two parties looking towards the same goal, and that goal is to figure out what do we want in life. It's really simple as that. And I didn't know what you wanted, and the only reason I asked you any questions was to figure out what did you want.
Khord would then be asked if he believes what he did was morally incorrect, and this is what he had to say about it, including some very, very suspect stuff about why he didn't follow through with his intentions as the clip ends.
Even if the age of consent is there, morally, is that not wrong to you? Like, morally?
Not at all. I think societally, yes, it is wrong. Like, societally, right now, there is obviously different, like, I think there was this old French book made in the early 20th century that had this rule that was basically, what is the perfect age to marry a bride? And it's this age. And then suddenly that got transformed to, this is the minimum age that you're allowed to, flirt with someone or to date. So it changed over time. So society changed over time and sensibilities did. And I mean, honestly, like, I kind of want to move forward from it because I didn't know about that whole age difference rule. I didn't. My only goal, and my personal moral code is you need to judge someone by their intention. My intention from the beginning was to ask questions to figure out what you wanted and to help you get what you wanted. And that's the big reason why we did not do anything sexual at all. It's because you didn't want that. Even though you said you wanted it online, in person you said you didn't. That's good. My only goal was to find out what you wanted and to help you get it. And that's it. You know, I mean, literally, I used to make chat rooms with like 20, 30 people just to try to get one person a date. Because I wanted to help them. Because I only want to help other people. That's literally my goal.
It would also come out and say that Khord allegedly made them show themselves to him alongside groping him, and that they had to get a friend and pretend to be their mother in order to get themselves out of the situation. Instead of denying the allegation like he usually does, he would instead try to downplay and say that they were a slut to shift the blame some more because that's all he does, notably ending his rant off saying he's proud of what he did and always will be. He would then admit to deleting messages constantly so people don't catch him incriminating himself, but we all know how that's been going for him so far throughout this video. Khord Kitty at first was just another typical lolcow, one with a very interesting renting situation and issues of keeping his fursuit clean. Going down this rabbit hole, however, led us to discovering one of the more despicable people on the internet and then some. What started off as just a really annoying person ended up being one of the more egregious examples of what not to become as you grow up in life. The people that Khord surrounds himself with are some of the worst out there, and whenever people question him about his affiliations, he would downplay or deny them entirely because he can't fathom the possibility that he might be the bad guy or part of the problem. That's not to mention the danger he puts his own children in due to his lack of self-awareness and genuine lack of care as well, and of course telling his grooming victim to their face that he never did anything bad to them. After going through all of this, it's absolutely mind-blowing that he still believes he's not the bad guy at all, but I can't say I'm surprised at this point. The subplots of this story, like with Deb and Kelly, give everything that extra flavor, and I'm willing to bet there are other stories out there that haven't made its way to the public yet for one reason or another. I have not a single clue what's going to come next in this story, because while it seems that most of it has been told already, there's still some parts we have no answers to just yet. Will he win his court case against Deb? Probably not. Will he stop associating with Growly? Probably not. Will he ever accept that he's part of the problem and take the L for once in his life? That's an easy no, but hey, maybe someday someone will finally be able to get that through to him, but that's just wishful thinking at this point. The story of Khord Kitty may seem to be in the second half of its lifespan, but until then we just gotta wait and see for what the future holds, and if you ask me, I'm very interested to see what happens next.